All right, everyone. In true Bungie fashion, we have our Wednesday TWAB, and this is going over abilities that I kind of want to go over. I mainly want to talk about the fragments because this is another really heavy build crafting post like our previous one. So starting off, they're actually going to be rescaling discipline, strength, and class ability to make it where tier 8 is actually going to be the brand new tier 10 essentially. They want to scale these back to reduce spam in PvP and also hone back PvE and reward build crafting if you are playing heavily into getting those abilities back. Whereas now you can kind of just take 100 discipline, you don't really have to play into it much, and you'll be good to go. So this overall is a nerf to that, but also at the same time, it does let you build craft a little bit more. Also, each stat tier would now provide a more consistent gain and cooldown instead of just random spikes, which is also a really good change. Now, another really cool change is that all these mods are here: Bomber, Dynamo, Outreach, Impact Reduction, Utility Kickstart, all of those normal mods that are normally elemental based, we are now going to be use them at the same time. So this means before you could not use like Dynamo and Ashes to assets because they were both on a helmet and they were different elemental types. Well, now since elemental types is going away, I would imagine this just means that yes, now you can use a Dino and Bomber. So that's really, really cool. And on top of that, they're also reducing the energy cost for a lot of the armor mods. So this means you can actually, mix and match or slot more things in. And they even say that they expect players to find unique combinations of mods and perks that they didn't even anticipate. So that is a really good sign. That sentence really has me excited because that means there's going to be so many different combinations that you can do with these. Now, they're also buffing Roman Supers slightly in the sense that they can generate more orbs now. It's increasing from 5 to 7, and the one-off supers are going to go from 7 to 5. This is definitely a good buff, but I think they need a lot more in this. They also mentioned they are going to be looking in for a lot more changes. This is just what's coming with Lightfall. Now, Hammer Soul, Daybreak, and Spectre Blades are going to be getting their base cooldown reduced, which is nice. That is a little buff for those. Hammer Soul's already pretty decent, but Daybreak and Spectre Blades and PvE are kind of, worthless. But Daybreak does have some more stuff coming up. So right here, War Dawn's getting nerfed in PvP with some other changes to help take down the bubbles slightly easier and more reliant. PvE, it's getting unchanged. In fact, I think it's kind of getting a buff in PvE because the overshield you get is now going to give you 50% damage reduction because it's going to be a void overshield. So that's honestly really crazy. Thundercrash is getting nerfed in PvE. It's unchanged in PvE. And the Fist of Havoc is also getting a 20% damage buff in PvE. I don't really think this is going to be enough to make people use it, but that's something. Plus with the orb change, maybe it could be pretty good. I'm not exactly sure. Sparkle resistance is actually getting nerfed. You got to be around 3 enemies now instead of 2, and the linear duration for it is now 2 seconds instead of 4. Sparkle resistance was a no-brainer, a fragment to take. It's by far one of the best fragments on the Arc 3.0 subclass. It still probably is going to be pretty good, don't get me wrong. It's just going to be a little bit harder to proc. Daybreak is getting a buff. Super energy cost reduced from 10% to 6.5% per swing, and it's going to increase the PV damage by 25%. Dawn Chorus users rise up. We might finally have a reason to equip it, especially with the increase in Scorch damage now. So if you're pairing that with Scorch weapons, since match game's going away, Daybreak could it's getting the reduced cooldown, the amount of time it takes to get to it. It's also going to not use as much energy per swing, and it's doing more damage. If there was ever a time for this to be good, hopefully it's now. We'll just have to wait and see. I'm excited for this change, and maybe with Wall of Radiance getting its nerf, it might be a reason to use this. Maybe it's going to be a really good DPS super. And on top of that, Phoenix Style's base cooldowns reduced from 82 seconds to 55, and the restoration you get while Heat rises this proc is going to be increased from 1 to 3 seconds. So it's going to be even easier to keep restoration up if you're running the Fragment Ember of Empyrean. Now, while your Daybreak is active, Phoenix Style's cooldown is significantly reduced, so it'll let you spam it a lot more, and the Phoenix Style detonation damage is going to be increased from 80 to 220. So that could be pretty fun. You could just spam Phoenix Styles down the ground when you're in Daybreak. I'm not exactly sure if people are going to use Phoenix Style even with these changes compared to Healing and Power Drift. Possibly. I know it does have a little community. I know some people use it. It is good if you are running Ember of Empyrean and you can get that restoration procced and keep that up 24/7. This will be a lot easier to do that now, so I could see some potential with it. Now, a really cool change is Crash Test Guardians. So now you are no longer going to die to the Architects. You actually just get reduced to 1 HP, which is really, really cool. So no more just a Cabal shield hitting you and you just getting flown across the map and dying. You will actually live now. Thank you so much, Bungie. This change is going to be amazing. I can't even tell you the amount of times I died to stuff like this. Then they also have plans to make fall damage non-lethal in a mid-season update. So if you die to fall damage a lot, There you go. That's going to be even better for you too. Now, here's where things get crazy. New tools in the arsenal. I figured we was going to get this with the current season of Destiny, but it seems like they're holding back for Lightfall. On top of them releasing the new subclass, just say forget about Strand right now, because we are going all over brand new fragments from what we already have in the game. So Arc is getting a fragment called Spark of Instinct. When critically wounded, taking damage from nearby enemies emits a burst of damaging arc energy that jolts targets. So this is going to be like a last ditch effort type of thing. When you're critically wounded, take a damage, will jolt enemies around you. That could be pretty good for surviving. Pair that with Spark Resistance, or even the fragment that lets you get more cooldown when you're critically wounded, could be really, really good. I don't think this is going to be one of the best fragments for it, but we'll just have to wait and see how it performs. Then we also have Spark of Haste. You have greatly increased resilience, recovery, and mobility while sprinting. Now, this could be really good for PvP, depending on how fast it takes to proc. Getting all these buffs for doing something that you just always do in the game could be really, really cool. And on top of that, Arc does have Spark of Focus, so after sprinting, you will get class ability generation as well. So those should be able to pair together, and you could probably do some interesting things with that. And I would imagine, since these are also increasing, the resilience, recovery, mobility, they are tied to your class ability. So they will synergize extremely well together and get your class ability back faster. Now, Solar has a lot more changes. They're introducing a fire sprite. Now, the reason Arc didn't get anything like this, because Arc has, Onyx traces. This is essentially kind of the Onyx trace / elemental well of Solar. The fire sprites are created by a suite of new and existing Solar fragments and grant grenade energy on pickup. So this means now you're going to get grenade energy, and if I remember correctly in one of the other posts, they're also going to have other additional benefits. They can play into something like seasonal mods, maybe even just other mods that are coming in the game. So I'd imagine there's going to be a little bit more aspect to them. Maybe they also granted armor charges. I think that might be a perk that's coming out in the artifact. But regardless, granting grenade energy is not a bad thing. Now, Emperor of Mercy, when you revive an ally, you and other nearby allies gain restoration. Picking up a fire sprite grants restoration. Now, Emperor of Mercy honestly is going to be really, really strong. Now, the first part where you revive an ally, you get restoration. That is a nice little touch, but the main thing is when you pick up one of these fire sprites, you are going to grant yourself restoration. So this means now, if you have a build, something like Starfire Warlock, this means that you will actually have a way to get restoration. With that build, most of the time you don't really have a way to proc that. This is going to allow that now, which is really, really strong. Now, Emperor Resolve, so Solar Grenade Final Blows cure you. So now I was just talking about Starfire. So now every time you get a fusion grenade kill, this will now cure you. This is going to be really good for survivability as well. You're definitely going to be able to play into increasing that survivability up a lot more with that specific build. I'm not exactly sure how much this will help out the Hunters and Titans. Hunter could be really strong as well now with their Tripmon focus build, because a problem with that build, kind of like the Starfire build, is you don't have restoration or any form of survivability. So these two fragments are going to allow you to have that now, which is really, really cool. Now, Ember of Tempering is going to change. It will now create a fire sprite on solar weapon kills while active, in addition to its original effects. Now, if you need a recap on what Ember of Tempering does, if we go over to our solar subclass and we take a look at it, when you get a solo weapon final blow, it will grant you some recovery, and it will also grant you some airborne effectiveness. This honestly is not terrible. I might slot this in now, since solo weapon final blows will just grant the fire sprites for you. And on top of that, you will also get that recovery bonus, which is really, really good. Now, Ember of Combustion will now create a fire sprite on solar super defeats in addition to its original effects. And again, if you need a recap on what that is going to do, so final blows with your solar super will cause targets to ignite. So this just gives your super another way of creating a fire sprite. I imagine if you're in a well of radiance and you get a kill, they will ignite like they currently do in the game and also create a fire sprite, which is pretty cool. Now, Ember of Searing now creates a fire sprite when defeating scorched targets in addition to its original effects. Now, I think this one is going to be the coolest one, because Ember of Searing, defeating a scorched target grants melee energy. With Solar 3.0, especially with things like Incandescent, you're scorching things all the time. So you're going to be defeating scorched targets everywhere, which means you will get a ton of melee energy back, and you will also now be spawning fire sprites, which will give you grenade energy back. So Ember of Searing is basically giving both cooldown for melee and grenade, essentially, with this change. And you can also play into the other stuff where you can proc, restoration now with Ember of Mercy. They're going to be a lot of cool different builds you get set up with this. I'm really excited for these brand new fragments. I definitely expect to see a bunch of builds coming out, not only with Strand now, coming out with Lightfall, because this it's just the beginning, because if we go to Void, we have even more. So Void Breaches are created by a selection of new and existing Void fragments and grants class ability energy on pickup. So just like the Fire Sprite, Void Breach does the exact same thing, except this one will grant class ability energy. So this has Echo of Cessation. Finish your final blows create a burst of void damage that causes nearby enemies to become volatile. Defeating volatile targets creates a Void Breach. So I would imagine the first part of this, the finish your final blow, is going to kind of work like your Falcons did when it first launched. You can just basically do that little void damage and make them volatile. Honestly, pretty good for ad clear. But the main thing is, again, defeating volatile targets create void breaches. With Void 3.0, we already know the amount of volatile we can get, especially with something like your Falcons. And you're going to be creating void breaches everywhere to get that class building energy back and play into other stuff that we don't currently know about. Now we also have Echo of Vigilance. Defeating a target when your shields are depleted grants a temporary overshield. So this just means when you're a red bar health, I imagine you just get a kill, you get a void overshield. Really good for survivability. I don't know if this one will get take too much, but you know, if you ever are in a pinch and you need to get a kill, this is good. But since you have things like Devour constantly healing you every time you get a kill anyway, I'm not exactly sure if you're going to run this one. I mean, I guess if you have Devour proc, you can get full health and an overshield if you are, you know, a red health bar, which is, I guess, kind of cool. But now we have Echo of Domineering. Now creates a Void Breach when defeating suppressed targets and additional to its original effects. So as a recap, Echo of Domineering, after you suppress the target, you gain increased ability and your current equipped gun is reloaded from reserves. It also grants +10 discipline, which is pretty cool. So this just means now when you suppress targets, you get that mobility, your gun's reloaded, and you will now create Void Breaches. Now we have Echo of Harvest, and that creates a Void Breach when defeating weakened targets with precision damage and additional to its original effects. So we have Echo of Harvest. Defeating weakened targets with precision final blows will create an overpower. This is definitely one of the most non-utilized fragments that we have in Void. No one really ever runs this, but if you do defeat a weakened target now, not only are you creating an orb, you're also going to be creating that Void Breach if it is with precision damage, which is really, really cool. I don't think this is still going to get used that much unless Void Breaches turn out to be extremely strong, but we'll just have to wait and see. Now we have Echo of Starvation. Now grants Devour on picking up a Void Breach in addition to its original effects. So this one right here is going to be really, really strong, and it honestly just slaps Warlocks in the face, because the main thing with Warlock is because you can easily proc Devour, Feed the Void. Well, now if you run this, picking up a Orb of Power, which is now going to be really heavily into the armor chart system, which we're going to be doing in the first place for builds, and now if you pick up a Void Breach, it will also grant you Devour. So that fragment's going to be really, really good, because you're going to have permanent Devour up 24/7, and we all know how strong Devour is. It pretty much makes you unkillable. You get your grenade a whole lot faster, and it is just very fun to play around. So that is pretty much all the changes for today. Obviously the fragments are kind of like the huge reveal, but everything else, all the changes are also gonna be really good. Let me know what you all think about them. I hope some of our roaming supers will become, you know, meta, things like Daybreak. I really like the change that we can use these, you know, all the time now. We're not limited, so this actually makes some build crafting really, really cool. And on top of that, the cost reduction to them is going to be really nice as well, since the artifact mod is now unlockable perks. You're going to have so much energy to build craft around. Very, very excited for that. But again, let me know what you all think. If you all enjoyed and learned anything new, consider subscribing, drop a like, turn notifications on. Also, if you like joining my Discord or follow me on any of my socials, all that will be linked in the description as well. But just know watching this video is way more than enough, and that every single bit of support from you all is truly appreciated. Thank you all so much for watching this one, and have a great day. Peace.